Hello guys and welcome to the video. So today we're going to be taking a look at Crow, the Dark Inugami. Crow is a 2A monster, or originally he's not 2A. We already talked about this in the last video. But Crow is a monster that you can obtain from like Dark Scrolls or secret dungeons. The ways you obtain this guy is pretty limited, since he has a dark attribute. Units that are like light or dark attributes are generally just harder to obtain. But this guy is totally worth obtaining him. I would pick him up if you haven't already. But if you're watching this video, you're probably not here wondering why you should get him. You probably already have him and you want to know how to build him and just everything you need to know about this guy, and that's what we're here for. So before we get into his runes, his builds, and probably even the stat requirements that you would need for this guy to work at his best, we will go through his skills so you guys have a better understanding of how he works, and maybe you even come up with some ideas to kind of like abuse this unit, because that's what you want to do. You want to abuse every unit you get. So his skill 1, let's get into his skill 1. He attacks the enemy with razor sharp claws and decreases the defense for 2 turns with an 80% chance, and inflicts continuous damage for 3 turns with an 80% chance. So as simple as the skill 1 looks, it is actually a really amazing skill 1, because that's a defense break with a high percentage, with a high base percent. Really good. And plus he places dots, so if you think about it, whenever he's not using his skill 2 or skill 3, he'll go in and he'll be placing debuffs of his own, defense breaking, just placing dots. The more dots he's placing, the more damage he's doing on his other skills. It's a really good first skill. It's not broken, but it's amazing in its own way. Skill 2 teams up with another ally to attack an enemy. The damage increases by 20% for each harmful effect on the enemy, and this effect also applies to the ally who he attacks with. So again, the skill 1's coming into use, right? It's being useful, right? With the dot placing, he's placing tons of debuffs. So skill 2 is obviously, like it mentions, it's a co-op. Him and an ally will attack. Both him and the ally will benefit. They'll have an increased 20% damage, both of them, when they attack an enemy per harmful effect. Skill 3 attacks on the enemy's wounds to leave a branding effect for 2 turns. The damage increases by 50% for each harmful effect on the enemy. Harmful effect increases for an extra turn, so it will be there for 3 turns when fully skilled up. One thing to note is I will have, by the way, the branding effect description on the screen for anyone who is new to the game. But as you look through his kit, you notice that he's just a nuker. He's there to deal massive amounts of damage, especially single target damage, but that's good for us. We could already see straight off the bat he's going to be useful in dungeons, especially like Kairos when you first start off in the game. But let's actually go and look at his runes. When looking at a monster's skills, and I'll say this every video, and I'll continue to say it every video, each monster can benefit from 4 stats. And in the last few videos, we haven't really been able to use 4 stats. They just don't need it. But Crow is finally different. We finally can use 4 stats on this guy. So I have 4 stats for you guys to focus on when you're building this guy. Obviously, the first 3 are gonna be pretty obvious, right? Attack, crit rate, and crit damage. But the final one is HP. Get this guy on some HP, and I'll explain why as we go through the stats. So obviously we start off with attack, or attack percent, whatever. We just want to build him on some attack, and the minimum, and when I say these stats, these are bonus stats. So if I ever say like 1,000 HP, you have to have plus 1,000, that green number right there. So for attack, he needs to have a minimum of 1,600 bonus attack. At the end of the day, this guy is a nuker. You want him to do big damage. He needs to have some form of attack on him. While crit damage is pretty good, you still need to have some attack on this guy. I think it's pretty simple. I don't need to go super deep into it. Now for crit rate, I have a minimum of 70% crit rate. Please at least go minimum 70%. If you can go higher, go higher. But 70% crit rate, I think, is a good area for people to kind of sit at. 70% or higher. You see mine is at 77%. Obviously, the more crit rate you have, the more you're going to crit. But if your crit rate's too low, It doesn't matter how much crit damage or attack you give him, he's just not going to be hitting hard at all. You want to make sure he's critting. 70% crit rate minimum. Some people might say higher, but I'm going to say minimum 70%. Crit damage, I say a minimum of 180%. I was thinking of whether or not I should go lower on this, like say 160% or 170%, but I put 180. By all means, if you can only achieve so much, then make crit damage like one of the last things you aim for if you have to. Out of like the first two, if you're aiming for attack or crit rate, go for attack or crit rate first before you go for crit damage. Because crit damage you can always increase in the future, but you need to make sure you're critting. Crit damage means nothing if you're not landing your crits, and crit damage doesn't really mean too much either if you don't even have attack to back it up. So, but I say 180%. I have 187%. And then last but not least, HP. Now, the reason I mention HP is and HP is something you should worry about later on as you continue to play the game and you start getting more and more runes. But the reason I say HP is because the further you get into the game and the more content you start doing, you can start getting into TOA hard. You start doing like things like dragon, or I don't think you would really bring him into Necro, but even if you did, Necro, Steel Fortress, whatever, you're going to realize that it doesn't matter how much damage he does. If he's dying to even like the waves, if he's dying in like for next to nothing, right? He's dying to regular hits because he's just that squishy. It's not really that helpful. He needs to be able to take a couple hits. So I put a minimum of 5k bonus HP. It's not that much, but I think minimum 5k bonus, it's like it should make him just tanky enough to survive. Even though by the time you do get to the end game, your team should be fast enough to where the waves don't really matter. But you'll notice this as you start playing the game, is that units like Crow, when they attack the boss, especially like in the Giants floor, if he gets counterattacked, he can get nuked. He can get like wiped. And like that makes your run slower. So you want to build him a little bit tankier. So let's move on to the runes. So his runes, obviously when you start out, you can go one of three ways. Fatal Blade, which is obviously the most recommended thing. You can go Triple Blade to help with that crit rate, and then aim for other stuff in the subs. And this is not really recommended, but you can do this if this is what you have to do. You can go Double Blade Energy. I wouldn't really recommend it, but if you're struggling to keep him alive for some reason, Double Blade Energy just might work as a temporary placeholder in the early game. Reminding you, in the early game. But if you can, I highly suggest getting him to Fatal Blade. Get him to Fatal Blade. You would build him attack, crit damage, attack. So here you go, attack, crit damage, attack. His runes aren't crazy on him. If I were to grind these out, it wouldn't be that bad at all, actually. I could get this higher. Oh my gosh. But yeah. And then when you get to the late game, you switch him to Rage Blade and then go attack, crit damage, attack. So I'll show you what Rage does. Here we go. A 4 set of Rage increases your crit damage by 40%, which is amazing. And we're going to actually take a look at some of the people's crows in a bit. And I found one person's crow, which I think is like, this is like what you should aim for, right? I'll show you the crow that you should aim for in a second. So other than that, his runes are pretty simple. What about his artifacts, right? Now, from the get-go, it may seem like, okay, obviously, go attack on his artifacts. I don't. I aim for HP in the artifacts. Reason being is because, again, I'm aiming for that HP. I'm trying to make him live a little longer. Trying to make sure he could take a hit. And it's done wonders. TOA hard mode is not that much easier. It's not that big of a difference, but getting him to that final boss stage is not as difficult, especially the higher you get in TOA hard. Is you're going to notice sometimes you're going to go through the waves and the enemies, sometimes you'll get like the light attribute enemies that will just focus Crow. And like sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. Just two of them focusing him can really bring him down to low health. And with him having a little bit of HP, he's surviving a bit more. And it's making these encounters not so scary anymore. So That's the reason I always recommend the the HP and the artifacts at the very least. If you go attack, there's nothing wrong with that. Before we get into his usage, let's look at some of the things here. So, I'll tell you one thing I dislike about looking at these. It's like, I'll look through these, and it's like, why is the top comment someone who doesn't even have crow built? You know what I mean? I want to see your crows. So, the best crow I've seen on here so far, this guy. This, I like his crow. I really do. I really like his crow. He has 100% crit rate, 251% crit damage. That crit damage, he got to 211% crit damage, and then let the Rage Blade carry him to 250. Pretty grinded out. It could be more grinded, I believe, but this is good. He has 1800 attack. You see, he has HP. He has some HP on him. He has attack. There's HP in the substat. So you see, grinded out HP. There's accuracy, whatever. This has HP. He needs to survive somewhat. I don't care how much damage your units do. If he takes one hit and he's gone, there's no point in having him in the team. If he's not even making it to the boss stage, there's no point in him being there. You need to make sure he survives. And you might be like, hey, it's the job of my supporter. I want to show you something. I really do want to show you something. Rank. I'm going to show you some of these top teams. I was about to say, not too much support. Not too much, right? You notice a lot of these speed teams are made to just deal tons and tons of damage. But you're bound to get some people who are trying this, and for the first time, a lot of people are using this team. I really like it. Lynn. Hey, that was Lynn. But if Crow's not making it to the final boss, if some of these units are just dying to the wave, which they shouldn't be. These are speed teams. Obviously, they're not dying. But for some people in the beginning, when they're starting out on Giants, and they're like, oh, my Crow's dying before I even get to the boss stage. My runs are like 2 minutes long. Your problem is your Crow's dying. Build him a bit more tanky. So you even see, like, that guy, he has a bit of tankiness to his Crow. I'm still working on my... Don't judge me on my Ikaru, okay? I'm still building this guy. But it's like, best Crow, potentially. Out of everyone here, this guy potentially has the best Crow. My fat fingers, man. But I love this right here. Plus, he has the skills fully up, so he's going to get that harmful effect rate. I know this guy has that 16-second speed team. But, his usage. Let's talk about his usage, and then we'll end the video. So, again, I write notes before I do these videos. Usage, I literally put everywhere. You can use this guy everywhere. You can take this guy into... if you start off in the game, he could be used in Giants. He could be used in Dragons. He could be used in Necro if you kind of think about it. Because he does have co-ops. He has single target hits, but he has co-ops, right? He can do big damage if you had the proper, team and speed tuning. But, maybe not really Necro. You could bring him, not really Punishers. You don't have to worry about that in the beginning of the game. You can bring him into TOA. You can use him in Arena. You can use him in Guild Wars. You could use him in the 2A dungeons to help you get other 2As done. This guy is usable almost everywhere. If not everywhere. He's usable. And he's very versatile. He's very strong. He's very, very OP. And there is one thing I want to mention. Some people always ask, Naomi or Crow? Go Crow. Crow's just that much more versatile. His damage increase is much higher than Naomi's. Naomi's damage is just a bit more consistent. Where is she? Her damage is just a bit more consistent. It's by 20% no matter what on all of attacks. So even her first skill is going to do it. But Crow's damage is just that much higher when you're thinking about speed rather than consistency. So... Also, Naomi has a fire weakness, while Crow, his only weakness is to light. But he even can deal increased damage to light. So, he doesn't really have a a attribute where he can't really do that much damage to. He can do a lot of damage to everybody. Well, Naomi, she really is like, you start off in Kairos with Naomi, and then you don't bring her into dragons because you can't, because you have attribute weakness. And then you don't really bring her into the Necro. You don't really bring her into Steel Fortress. You can take her through TOA. You can kind of use her in Arena and Guild Wars, but Crows is better. So, his usage is everywhere. You'd use this guy everywhere. So, if you haven't already, pick him up. It is worth sitting there in 1050. Farm your hall of magics and do your essence. Like, try to get the secret dungeon yourself. But it is worth sitting there if you have to get the secret dungeon from other people. Request it. Don't spam those channels. Please don't. And, yeah. So this is a pretty short video, which is why I'm uploading it so frequent after my previous one. I hope I taught you guys something. I hope I helped you guys in some areas. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.